March 30th, 1981, the day a bullet nearly changed history. It was just 69 days into his presidency. The crowd cheered, the sun shone through the cold Washington air, and then, gunshots, screams, chaos. In a flash, history teetered on the edge of a bullet. This is the story of the day Ronald Reagan was almost assassinated, and how a single moment could have altered the fate of America forever. March 30th, 1981, Washington, D.C. The day began like any other. President Ronald Reagan was scheduled to speak at the Washington Hilton Hotel, addressing labor leaders from the AFL-CIO. It was a public appearance, routine, well-covered, and supposedly secure. At 70 years old, Reagan was the oldest president ever elected at the time, yet his energy was palpable. Just 2 months into his presidency, his popularity was rising. A new optimism had begun sweeping through the country, and Reaganomics was the buzzword on every economist's lips. But lurking in the crowd that day was a man with a different plan, a man whose mind had spiraled into obsession and delusion. His name was John W. Hinckley Jr., and he had a gun in his pocket. John Hinckley Jr. was a troubled soul, a drifter. The son of a wealthy oil executive, Hinckley had never quite found his place in the world. By the late 1970s, he had become increasingly isolated, withdrawn, and mentally unstable. But it was a movie that sent him over the edge. Taxi Driver, the 1976 Martin Scorsese film starring Robert De Niro as Travis Bickle, a mentally unstable loner who plots to assassinate a political figure. Hinckley saw himself in Bickle. He also became fixated on actress Jodie Foster, who had played a teenage prostitute in the film. In a disturbing twist of delusion, he came to believe that if he assassinated the President of the United States, Jodie Foster would notice him, would love him. Obsessed, deranged, and now armed with a .22 caliber Rome RG-14 revolver, the president's motorcade pulled up to the Washington Hilton just after 1:45 p.m. Secret Service agents flanked him. The route was familiar, one frequently used because of its secure design, a U-shaped driveway with short walking distance from car to door. Reagan gave his speech with charm and humor, drawing laughs and applause. By 2:27 p.m., he was walking out the hotel's VIP exit, waving to the small crowd of journalists, staffers, and onlookers behind a rope line. Among them, John Hinckley, standing just a few feet away. He raised his revolver and pulled the trigger 6 times. The first shot struck Press Secretary James Brady in the head. He collapsed instantly, critically injured. The second and third bullets hit a police officer and a Secret Service agent. The fourth missed. The fifth ricocheted off the bullet-resistant side of the presidential limousine and struck Reagan. The sixth was fired as agents tackled Hinckley to the ground. Reagan, at first, thought his ribs were bruised from being shoved into the car, but inside the limousine, he began coughing up blood. Agent Jerry Parr, Reagan's bodyguard, made a split-second decision. "We're going to George Washington Hospital now." The president was rushed into emergency surgery. The bullet had lodged just an inch from his heart. Doctors performed a thoracotomy to remove the slug and stop the internal bleeding. Remarkably, Reagan stayed conscious for much of the ordeal. Ever the showman, he cracked jokes before surgery. "I hope you're all Republicans." To which the surgeon replied, "Today, Mr. President, we're all Republicans." He even told his wife, Nancy, "Honey, I forgot to duck." But behind the humor was a stark reality. Reagan had lost nearly half his blood volume. It was a miracle he survived. Meanwhile, James Brady lay in critical condition. He would survive, but with lifelong injuries. News of the assassination attempt stunned the nation. For hours, the line of presidential succession hung in limbo. Then, Vice President George H.W. Bush was aboard Air Force Two and was told not to return to Washington immediately, to avoid looking like he was assuming power. Inside the hospital, Reagan's resilience astonished doctors. Just 12 days later, he walked out of the hospital, waving to the press, joking again. But something had changed in America. The image of Reagan, strong, brave, even humorous under fire, cemented his legacy early on. His approval ratings soared. Congress rallied behind him. Even political opponents were moved. James Brady would go on to become an advocate for gun control. The 1993 Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act would be named in his honor. John Hinckley Jr. declared not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent over 3 decades in a psychiatric facility before being released under strict conditions in 2016. What if that bullet had been 1 inch to the left? What if Reagan hadn't survived? What if, in just 69 days, the 40th president had become the second to be assassinated in the 20th century? Would the Cold War have ended the same way? Would the economy have shifted as it did? Would the world remember Reagan the same? One man's obsession, 1 gun, 6 shots. A moment frozen in time, a moment that could have shattered history. But instead it became a story of survival, of leadership under fire, and of a president who quite literally took a bullet for his country. March 30th, 1981, the day the Gipper almost didn't get up again, but he did, and the world kept turning.